Have you ever heard people say that we have a one-party system and need a two-party system? Or that we need a third party? Let me show you why we have a two-party system now, and why Democratic and Republican political systems like ours will always produce two parties, and why we actually only need one. Our system started with the Constitution, which the founders of the Republic gave us in 1789. It created the structure we have today. It created the Congress, the executive branch, and the courts, and vested all power in these to administer government. The idea in the structure of our republic was to create checks and balances so that each branch of government was equal in its power, and no single branch could encroach on the power and domain of any of the other two. In theory, this would prevent any one vital branch of government from garnering too much power or threatening the whole system, thus preserving the rights and liberties of the people. The theory was that this would give strength and stability to the system as a whole, like a three-legged stool, strong, stable. With a new political system in place, what would emerge next are what we call politicians, like these guys. Politicians were part of the original plan. As representatives of the people, it's their job to do many things, but first they must appeal to their constituents and gain their trust. So they must go through a process and be nominated, and give some speeches to let people know where they stand on issues, so that only the best can be elected. Most Americans are somewhat familiar with this process, so it is not necessary to go into too much depth. Suffice it to say, they are responsible for doing a few things. So what else must politicians do? Well, as representatives, they are here to do things like write bills and make laws, and various sundry and assorted other things. Then, government is about the power of serving and protecting those things of value to us people. So, to ensure that we are safe, they must make laws to do things that protect us, such as policing. That is where Officer Firm but Friendly comes in. He is here to serve and protect and uphold the laws, and he takes that very seriously. So seriously, in fact, that sometimes when things look as though they may get a little out of hand, in a pinch, Officer Firm but Friendly may call for backup, and thank God when that backup arrives. It may be necessary for them to show up and lend a hand. Backup is also here to serve and protect, while you are fully complying with their every command. Thank God government is able to send in backup. Sometimes government itself is very glad to have backup on their side too. It's easy, just make a law, because sometimes we people don't feel like complying with their every command. But thankfully they can make laws to ensure that we're mostly happy with complying. And if any of us have had a recent encounter with Officer Firm but Friendly, we have probably run afoul of him and a law, while he is serving and protecting us. So now we have to go and see Judge Gavel about the law. Sometimes it's necessary for government to also protect and serve us around the world. And that means our politicians need to make a law to have powerful military machines that are very useful in serving and protecting us and many others around the world, and spreading our ideas and values to all of the poor people around the world that are not as fortunate as we are. And sometimes, when some of them are not willing to fully comply, it requires a law giving just a bit more force. Then sometimes, when they have been fully served and protected, and they have fully complied, it may still take a few of our advisors to advise them to stay fully complied with the law. Now, unfortunately, many of the things the government does when making laws requires lots of money, and money comes from banks, like the government's own private bank, which creates money. How fortunate for us people that our government has a bank that is able to create money to fund our politicians' vital government activities whenever needed. Where did this bank come from? Easy, they made a law. Sometimes things can go wrong and banks get tired of creating money, and instead it starts to lose the ability to create enough money. When this happens, the bank must ask politicians to make laws that help them by giving them a great deal of our money so that government can keep the bank from collapsing the entire world economy, which is usually bad. Sometimes our politicians must provide the vital government function of serving and protecting many others from around the world when they ask for our money. Or they ask to come into our country to live off of our own good fortune. How fortunate for all these people from around the world that our politicians can make a law and our government is there to give them our money and a new place to live whenever they need it. Just like that. But we don't mind, do we? Sometimes it's vital for some of our own people who need to be served and protected to give them all of our money to spend rather than us spending it ourselves. Simple, make a law. Our politicians are usually right there making sure that vital government function is done. Then, to sort all of this out, to see which politicians are going to get a bigger role in serving and protecting us with vital government functions, groups of us align ourselves in factions, and they associate under their symbols and banners. Most of our politicians really value these factions, which are here to fairly represent the thoughts and sentiments of all of us. But unfortunately, they really only represent the thoughts and sentiments of a very small fraction of us people. These factions also vitally need to have our money given to them. Thank God they made laws so that vital money falls from above whenever it's needed. Now, remember when I showed you how in theory our system is stable, like a three-legged stool with checks and balances? Forget that. There are no checks and balances. Quite simply, all three branches act like a cartel. They rarely counter one another, but mostly collude in unanimous acts through an arrangement produced by the structure. Let's examine why. We started by me telling you why we have a two-party system now and why we actually need a one-party system. To better understand that, let's look at the parties. The first one looks like this, and the second one looks like this. And only the second one matters. So how do we fix that? We fix that by rearranging things a little. Let's start by replacing this with this. Then we need to get rid of all these guys because they are not needed anymore. And if they are not needed any longer, then what can we say other than they are obsolete? When we do that, we people then make the laws, and that sends a message to whoever we leave remaining of these guys that they are only employed servants and caretakers, and that their only vital function is as a dutiful utilitarian, and they have no more power than that of an employee. When we the people make the laws, all of this goes away, and we are left with the only party that matters.